Israeli lawmakers pass a key law to weaken the judiciary despite public outrage. Israeli lawmakers on Monday approved controversial changes to the judiciary, part of a package of proposed actions that's roiled the country in protests in recent months and sparked opposition from broad swaths of Israeli society. The vote in the Knesset, Israel's parliament, capped a months-long campaign by Israel's far-right government to weaken the judiciary, a move critics say pushes the country toward authoritarianism. Israel's far-right government wants the power to override its Supreme Court. The measure passed uncontested after opposition lawmakers shouted, "Shame!" at their colleagues before walking out in protest. Ahead of the vote, lawmakers were unable to reach a compromise with the political opposition. The controversial bill passed by a vote of 64-0 in the Knesset. All members of the governing coalition voted in favor of the bill, while all opposition lawmakers walked out of the chamber as the vote was taking place. Huge crowds of angry protesters gathered outside, attempting to block access to the building. They were met with barbed wire and water cannons, and at least 19 were arrested, according to Israel police. Former Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid said he would file a petition with the Supreme Court on Tuesday to block the law and has urged the military reservists not to refuse to serve until the court delivers its ruling. The so-called reasonableness law takes away the Supreme Court's power to block government decisions by declaring them unreasonable. Its passing could trigger a constitutional crisis, if the court declares the law itself is unreasonable. In a highly unusual step, the U.S. President Joe Biden weighed in on the policy and warned that rushing the changes through without a broad consensus amounts to an erosion of democratic institutions and could undermine U.S.-Israel relations. Biden raised concerns directly with Netanyahu during a phone call last week and then called New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman to the Oval Office to make clear his stance on the judicial overhaul. Speaking after the Knesset passed the bill on Monday, the White House said it was unfortunate that the vote today took place with the slimmest possible majority. The Israeli stock market dropped after the vote, its main index, the TA 35, trading more than 2% lower. The Israeli shekel was also weaker against the dollar, dropping just under 1%. The fierce debate over the planned judicial overhaul has turned into a battle over the soul of the Israeli state. It has pitted a coalition of right-wing and religious groups against the secular, liberal parts of Israeli society and sparked the longest and largest protests in the country's 75-year history. The fight is happening against the backdrop of some of the worst violence in many years. The number of Palestinians, militants and civilians, killed in the occupied West Bank by Israeli forces is at its highest in nearly 2 decades. The same is true of Israelis and foreigners, most of them civilians, killed in Palestinian attacks. Netanyahu and his allies call the measures reforms, and say they are required to rebalance powers between the courts, lawmakers and the government. Other parts of the planned overhaul which are yet to be voted on by the Knesset would give Netanyahu's coalition more control over the appointment of judges, and would remove independent legal advisors from government ministries. Despite his victory on Monday, Netanyahu is likely to face more pressure over the reforms. The Israel Bar Association is already preparing a legal challenge to the bill, the lawyers group said Sunday. The bar is also warning it will shut down, as an act of protest against the anti-democratic legislative process, the statement said. That means the Bar Association would not provide professional services to its members, not that lawyers would go on strike. The law still needs to be rubber-stamped by Israel's President Isaac Herzog, a formality under Israel's political system.